All right. We're going to get started here with our afternoon session. So welcome back. Again, great session this morning with our panelists. Very exciting information that was shared. Thanks again to Bill, Rebecca, and Chris for their time again this morning. This afternoon session, we're going to break into a couple different areas. We've got, starting right now, we've got Ryan Charnock. He's going to be leading the session on Microsoft Teams as a hub for teamwork. Right after that, he'll be passing it over to Clay Osborne. He's going to go into PowerApps and Flow for business process. And then after that, we affectionately call Eric Inch, Mr. Security from Microsoft, who will be giving us a security session. And we'll be wrapping up shortly thereafter to get you guys on the road and out of downtown. So I kind of feel like I don't really need an introduction after this morning's session with Mr. Ryan. He kind of speaks for himself. He's been an amazing superhero for a lot of our clients. He's really leading that transformation and change for a lot of them. So I won't take any more time and give this right over to Ryan. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Dave. All right. Hey, guys. Hey, I'm Ryan Charnock. I'm the collaboration Office 365 lead for Red Level, and they asked, like, how did you get all of your favorite people onto this into the panel here? I go, well, I was the only one that showed up for that meeting today, so I got my people in. Went by default. So I'm super happy to say those are my good friends and clients that I got a chance to work with. So this is me. I'm Ryan Charnock. This has been my space. I've been working in for the last, I don't know, 20 years, it feels like, for my professional career. Once upon a time, I was an instructor for New Horizons. So I did a lot of technical work in the SharePoint space for SharePoint 2007. Then I got out of that, went to be in Chrysler's IT environment and led the user adoption of SharePoint within about 20,000 people within Chrysler, one of the largest SharePoint implementations in the world, over 200 servers in their environment there. And I got a chance to join a consulting firm with CDH and Red Level, and now everybody's my client. Okay, so I live downriver, and these are my kids. They're awesome. I get a chance to brag. And my ballet dancer, I get to be in the ballet with her every year, so that's really cool. So awesome. All right, there's a clicker here. Moving on. All right, so I'm gonna go through just some basic ideas about what teamwork really begins to solve. And then I'm gonna show with you guys about 3 different use cases or case studies where we've implemented teamwork or we're designing a teamwork implementation that kind of echo one of those problems they're trying to solve. So these are the common problems that everybody has, that it's hard to find things. How many would agree? It's hard to find content? Yeah, it is. It's a common problem, and people are wasting time. They're spending time finding data and actually instead of doing something that's the title on their business card. So we believe if I give you more time for whatever your title is, let's say it's the director of HR, you can do more directing of HR things instead of hunting down a document, right? So that's kind of a problem we've been trying to solve for the last 25 years. Another problem of this is, there we go, that's the number of average emails you get a day, 122. How many guys are above? Anybody below? You're amazing. I want your life. Oh, look at that. $50. So the idea is that email is awesome. It's very strong and it's well used and well loved. And when you're in like a survival situation, you go with what you know and what you have certainty with. So how many guys feel like your every day is in survival mode? So we go with what we know and we have certainty with. So which means we're not innovating. We're not thinking about what is the best tool. We just go with the tool we know works, which we know is email for collaboration, for an all company email, for news posts, for that kind of things. So this is what a lot of our transformation engagements look like, is like, hey, let's just stop. Let's think about this. Maybe there's a better tool to use for that particular scenario. So that's a problem everybody has. Next problem. Okay, is employee turnover. Okay, you have somebody, and Rebecca mentioned it, a lot of these organizations, their branding is so good, their culture is so awesome, nobody leaves. Okay, it's true. You're kind of an enemy of your own success. And so the problem is that these folks will eventually leave, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to replace them. And my thinking is that it does cost money for like recruiters and actually finding good talented help out there, but also the person that's been there the longest, the more the relational network grows and the more responsibility they have. And they also kind of have this intrinsic knowledge that, well, if you need something shipped and the shipper application is down, well, dude, you just walk down to the docks and you talk to Jim and you give him a little handwritten note, he'll get it shipped for you. Where is that written down? It's not. But they've been here so long, they know that. So when you find a replacement, you got to hire 2 people, not 1. That's a problem. Okay. The next thing is, what is the best way to collaborate? Okay. If you look at this scene from Forrest Gump, what is he trying to do here? He's convincing them to take a piece of chocolate. Come on, you guys don't know this movie, right? Okay. So let's say we try to do that. Same scenario. Says he's very odd. He's kind of an odd person. He's trying to get people, complete strangers on a bus stop, to participate and collaborate in his story and partake of a little snack. Okay, does this sound like real world? It's a metaphor, but it's applying, isn't it? Okay, so then he's doing it in person, which I think is the best way. But maybe second best would maybe we could use some kind of chat feature. Let's say you can't get in person, right? And this is our business world, isn't it? Is that first person, in-person contact is the best way to communicate and collaborate. But if I can't get in front of you, then maybe the next thing I could do is at least get some kind of two-way, high velocity type of chat. Then the worst way I would say would be that. Sending emails, right? It has a long duration, it has to wait for it to come, wait for it to send. And you notice it's the matter of volume, it's the frequency, like how fast can we communicate, right? And you ever noticed that when you're in a meeting, you pick up on all these nonverbal cues from people? Like you're communicating to me right now, all your nonverbal cues, and I'm giving you the same. We're communicating. But if I can't see you, I have to ask and say, do you understand? And then you have to go, what did he just say? And then you have to decide what's the appropriate response to my question in an audio scenario. You're like, yes, Ryan, I understand, right? That is all these cycles that now just slow down our communication. But if you really just need to do it in person, you just go, yep. You don't have to say anything. You nod. There's all these cues that are much faster. So when it comes to best way to communicate, that's a problem, is that we have people that are in remote locations. I can't do face-to-face. So now how do I do these other things? And this is where Microsoft Teams is really starting to come into play. Oh yeah, this is kind of funny too. Nice little joke here, right? This is us, IT. We're the odd guy. You should use this stuff. All right. The other problem I find is this problem I call the problem of proximity. The problem of proximity is this. Let's say this is the house that you bought and you're going to renovate it, but you keep all of your tools in this garage over there. So you go to work on the kitchen and the plumbing and you realize, oh, I need a wrench. So you walk outside the front door, you walk out to the garage, you grab a wrench, you come back, you start working, you're like, oh, I need another tool, I need a screwdriver. So you walk out the front door and you go back there. How many trips does it take before you grab the whole toolbox? Right? We're smart people, we'll just move the toolbox in. So that's the problem, is this proximity. When something feels far away, we just take what's far away and we make our own local storage of it. Let's now change the metaphor. This is SharePoint. This is your network drive. This is your public document storage. This is the official place where you store all of your tools. How many people take the documents from there and store them locally on their own PCs and desktops? Which then goes to the first problem, a search problem. Because now you need to find that document. It's now actually located in 2 different locations, in 2 different versionings, and on 3 different desktops. See how that works? This is actually a problem we have not been able to solve in my career. I used to spend lots of energy getting people, hey, go out to SharePoint, put all your documents there, work with the live document. It's on this, look, just leave your desktop. It's going to be okay. We'll come back. Look, it's still there. Okay, right? And we sneak them out to a browser, put them into some fancy URL, like, look, it's your portal. We think those words are like magic and they'll give them safety. No, they're like, still want to go back to their desktop. So it's still, SharePoint was awesome, but it still felt far away in a web context. Where this is where Microsoft Teams then says, dude, let's become a desktop app. Let's put it right where people live. Let's bring their files for their departments. Let's bring chat right to them. Let's bring their phone right to them. Let's bring everything instead of far away. Let's bring it right to them. So they can be good with solving whatever their business problem is and not have to worry about, hey, where are things located at? So that's a major problem, concern. Okay, so with all those concerns, let's get to our first case study. Okay, so the case study I have here is an organization where they had classic team sites. Okay, and this is for actually a local museum here in the area. So they had a SharePoint deployment, and they had lots of team sites. And the way they had team sites, they had a team site for every exhibit, which is, you think of it like a project. It's like a year and a half long project when they develop a new exhibit for that they're going to roll it out to the museum. So in that team site, they had everything from a splash page, a series of folders that are institutionalized, all the documents that they needed. They put a lot of stuff in there. And I go, that's awesome. How's it working? They go, it's amazing. We love it. But I go, well, who loves it? Well, it's the people who created the team site. They're the ones who love it. Not necessarily everybody else has to consume it, because they deal with the problem of proximity. Like, where is this exhibit data? It's not on an intranet. It's like in this other little space. It's an exhibit site that's kind of connected to it. You have to go out to the intranet, find some link, know the name of it. Then you find the site, and there it is. And the documents are out there, and they're actually, all of them are being replicated on the people's local drives. They're making draft copies, then updating previous ones. They're kind of doing collaboration. I would say they have a reasonable level of collaboration, but it still feels far away. Okay, and does this kind of sound familiar? If they need to make a change, they do a file download, they update it, and then they re-upload it. Does that make sense? That process. And then if they need to communicate, they just send things via email still. So those problems are still facing them. Those were really the issues they're facing. I said, okay, how about, is there a way we can take these classic team sites and bolt them and bring them really close into Microsoft Teams? That was the question. That was the kind of the goal. So, hey, can we do that? Can we take this thing and bring it to Microsoft Teams? So here's how you can do it. So Microsoft, I did a little research and said, hey, here's a 3-step process you can do this. Okay, step 1, you can take your existing SharePoint Classic team site. Okay, I'm getting a little technical on you guys. Okay, you hanging with me? Okay, and then you can actually create it into what's called, turn it into a Microsoft group. Okay, and then a Microsoft group. Okay, then you can, step 2 is you can take that group and you can teamify it. Everybody say teamify. Impress your teenagers. It'll be a great word. Okay, so then you teamify it. Okay, which then gives it a Teams interface, and then you're able to move the files from whatever they're at, their locations, and put them into actual Teams channels. Okay, and now all those things were very far away. They're now being surfaced right live on their desktop. That's cool. That's way cool. Now, the way you can do this is that each site owner can do a DIY. They can take their own individual site collection, and then they can go, boom, I want to do it. Bam, 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 go through the steps themselves. Okay, but if you want to do it in bulk or wholesale, Microsoft does offer a little scan tool. I got it here on the slide. These will be available to you. You get the references later. You can also Google. That's really helpful too. Okay, there's a scan tool that allows you to scan your entire environment, give you a report. Here's your classic team sites. Convert these guys, and you can go through this conversion process also through some PowerShell. Alrighty, so that's the process. You want to see it? Let's do a demo. Come on. I think that's the next slide. Yes, it is. All right, let's switch. There we go. All right, you guys ready? Okay, here we go. So I have a classic team site. Minimize, let's minimize that guy. And here we go. So let's go find it first. All right, so classic team sites, they do not show up under active sites. These are sites that you see here. Ooh, these are all the guys that are out there. Okay, so we need to have a classic team site. So I got to go to they've really buried this now. Records management, BCS, apps. Term store. Why is this so hard to find? Here we go. Classic team site page. And I'm not used to mousing with one hand. You know how many guys are keyboard and mouse people? Here we go. All right. If you're not sure what a classic team site is, you remember now? Okay, so what you have here is a basic just SharePoint 2013 kind of looking site. 2016 looks pretty similar. Okay, but what we really want to do is we want to now connect this to Microsoft Teams. And so this is exhibit 11C. 11C, I just came up with some generic number. Okay, and I really want to have this thing listed so that when I get to Teams, okay, here's my Teams. When I get the teams, I want to have it listed in this team space so I can use the exact same documents in a nice, close, local kind of context. So I can chat about the documents, we can hold meetings about the documents, we can see all the context back and forth. So mechanically, here's how you do it. Step one is I'm going to do the DIY method. Okay, you go to the site itself, and this is if I'm the user. It's got this great little item that says connect to an Office 365 group. I'm going to say, yeah, let's do that. And this is kind of like follow the bouncing wizard kind of thing. Just follow along. It says, are you sure? Yeah, wow, this is amazing. It's exciting. Let's go build this thing. So exhibit this is its address. I'll say, hey, great, let's connect this to a group. It gives me an opportunity to add additional members. I'll say, no, I'm good for now. Say finish. Awesome. And I instantly get the site gets converted from a classic view to what they call modern. Okay, so we're seeing the modern news web part that's here. We're seeing the quick links are modernized, the documents, and this is the same set of documents that I had. It basically just get a conversion from classic SharePoint team site to a modern. Yay, that's amazing. Okay, but it's only at this point, it's only a Microsoft group. Anybody use groups before? And I would guess you've used groups because you started using them before Teams was released. Okay, at this point in the game, most people aren't outright using groups explicitly because they chose so. Okay, and the reason why is because groups, they actually show up in Outlook and they have their own set of interface, and it's not as high velocity of a pace of things. Okay, so but groups are kind of like a back-end thing that teams actually have to be a part of and use. So let's do this. So if I were to go, we want to turn this exhibit 11C into a group, or actually into a team. So if I go into Microsoft Teams, I go to create or join a team. And this is the final step. I'm going to say, hey, let's go create a team. And this I can say build from scratch, or I can create from an existing group. It's kind of like you have to have one. The group is the middle step in between these two things. I want to have it from an existing Office 365 group. It says, oh, look at that. There it is. That guy. It's going to now create the team. It's showing up right here in my Teams environment. That's amazing. But if I go to General and I go to Files, I still set it up. It's going to say, hey, where are these files? Okay, where are these files? Now, does anybody know the difference? Where does Microsoft Teams store all of the files? In SharePoint, more specifically, give me some more details. What library? Documents. And then every channel is then what? Its own folder inside of it. So the final step here is to take people's documents that were in maybe natural SharePoint libraries and then move them into channel folders so they then surface automatically in this Teams environment. So let's go through the process here. Let's make a quick little channel. Add a channel. We'll call this C1 for channel 1 because I'm only typing with one hand. Okay, so C1 looks great. Awesome. Okay, great. No files in it. But if we go out to the exhibit site, we go to documents, we're not going to see evidence of the teamification. We've now teamified this. There's the general channel and there's the C1. So now the objective, I want to surface these guys inside Microsoft Teams. Hold on. Let's move these guys. I'm just going to move them into that channel. Current library, C1. Let's move them there. So it's going to go through this little chunking process. It's going to pick them all up. It's going to put them into that particular folder. But by doing that, it's like mystery little portals, like the little wardrobe in Narnia. It now ports them into this magical kingdom of Teams where everything is amazing and you get Turkish delight every day. Oh, that's the bad guy, isn't it? Okay, bad. I did that story wrong, didn't I? Okay, so the documents are there. Let's go see if they actually show up. So if I go back over to Teams, we go to, I'll just refresh the page. How about that? Refresh the page. Hey, look at that. There's the documents. And I'm going to say dismiss this guy. So there you have it. That's the end of my demo. So the first problem that we came with this client is they had all this existing infrastructure, existing kind of SharePoint environment with all these classic team sites. And you can do a couple of things with them. You can just abandon them and then rebuild kind of a greenfield in Teams. right? Departmental sites to project sites, cross-functional things, or you can actually convert them, okay? And so this was a great little use case. We found this process of going through that, thank you, going through of just connecting the SharePoint team site to an Office 365 group. Then you create a team, you join that to a team, and then you just move files into some channels, and voila, pretty painless process of doing that. Great. Does anybody have a good question?
So what happens if you have granular permissions on a file folder level?
I'm so glad you asked, because that's our next scenario. Got it. So the next case study we found was, oh, Teams is awesome. Like, yes, Teams is awesome, but Ryan, we have mixed permission scenarios, right? How many guys have mixed permission scenarios? Okay, awesome. Okay, well, number one, cut it out. That's your first solution. Okay. Okay, the second solution you can do is to say, well, this is my standard answer, is to say, well, then have a team for every unique set of users. Keeps it easy, because at a team level, you can control, it's 5 people can have access to this team, and 4 people can have access to this different team, and 10 people can have this to this team. Okay, that's nice, but that's pretty big. Those are big objects. Microsoft has not released, but it's on their roadmap, okay, to then have permissions at a channel level. We're kind of waiting. We're kind of waiting for that. All right, we're waiting for that. So, which is, I got mixed feelings about. I got mixed feelings about. But anyhow, so this was the scenario we had. I had a scenario where I had it was an organization, and they do a lot of acquisitions. They acquire other organizations. So every time they had a project was a new acquisition. They're acquiring a new company, a new organization. Okay, so that the internal group needed access to all of the channels 1, 2, and 3. Boom, boom, boom. And they needed to do collaboration in a high velocity way. So Teams is the obvious choice. Okay, because they can have chat, they can have calendars, the meetings and tabs and files and bots and apps and all that stuff. Yeah, it's awesome. What Teams? Let's give it to me. They go, but Ryan, I have a certain set of folders that are inside there that need to go shared externally with the people we're actually purchasing their business from. So they can put in their leases, put in their payroll, we can capture all this stuff. And I go, well, you don't like email? They're like, funny. Right? No, they don't want email. They want to be able to put their documents in there, have a landing place for them to put all their content in. I go, what have you been doing up to this part? They go, we've been using Dropbox. Like, oh. How does that working out for you? Not really good. I'm like, okay, because now we have stuff in Dropbox, we got stuff over here. Can we just have a unified Microsoft kind of audited solution? Sounds like a good idea to me. Okay, IT put you up for that, didn't they? No. So what I really want to do is I want to really share out, have folder A, okay, or folder B, one of these 2 folders, have that accessible to Jack and Jack only. Okay, but the problem is, okay. Well, let's look at it. The problem is that if I make Jack a member of this team, what does he have access to? Some or all? It's all. Okay, that's the issue we're really dealing with. So then we came up with this little trial and kind of architecture. When you have a team, we just saw in the last example, a team that has an echoing SharePoint site that if you put a document here, it's actually storing it in SharePoint behind the scenes. Every channel is actually a folder, and you can create subfolders and vice versa. You guys follow me? So here's what we decided to do, is that what we decided we wanted to do is like, hey, how about we just go into SharePoint and share just that one folder with Jack? He doesn't need access to the team side of things, which is like our internal kind of like house kind of party, internal communications, all that dialogue. But we do have content that he can have access to that our folks can put content in and kind of share with him. So what do you think about that? They said, it's great. Can it work? Sure can. Let's go see it in action. All right. And nope, you're not. I'm not sharing, am I? I'm close. There it is. Okay, great. I have a team here called Acquire Acme. That's the project. We're acquiring the Acme organization. Looney Tunes, you know them. Dynamite and everything. It's awesome gifts for your cousins and nieces and nephews. Don't give it to your own children. Okay, so I got a series of folders here, channels, finance, payroll, property, looks awesome. And if I go into the files area, it shows me subfolders because you can organize your documents inside folders here. Okay, now one thing I could do, I could go here and like I mentioned before, I can go to manage team and I could add Jack in as a member, but he gets access to everything. It's too much. He sees all, you're opening it up, you're seeing the Komodo, they're seeing all the goods. We don't want that. Okay, so what, Ryan, well, could we do, if you notice in here inside of Teams, could I use this get link thing? Sure, if I use the get link, okay, this is a different browser. I'm logged in as Ryan from a different domain. Okay, if you give it a shared link, this is not going to work either. It'll open up and say, it just won't show me it. And in some cases, it'll even say access denied. I think it eventually gives me the access denied. It doesn't exist or no longer work. You don't have access to that, dude. No good for you. So yeah, you can't use the get link. I thought that would be a really safe thing. You're in Teams, you want to share with somebody externally, you just grab the link and chuck it over to them and maybe it'll work. That doesn't work either. So we had to go actually right to the direct source. So let's switch back over. Change identities, and I got to go, let's open this guy up in SharePoint. Now, when you get to SharePoint, there's a couple of different ways you can share stuff, okay? So one of the cool things you can do inside SharePoint is you can do this, they got this kind of new sharing tool. That if you go up to the gear here, you go up to site permissions. I know this is a little educational, you guys, you gonna hang with me, little tips. This is the stuff that'll make you hit on parties, I promise. It's like my best joke. Okay, so it's got the share feature, and if you go, I want to invite somebody, maybe you could invite somebody and check this out. Well, maybe I can just share the whole site with that guy, with Jack, my external user. But even in the fine reading thing, yeah, you got to read. I know users, don't count on users to do this, right? So it says, if you add users here, they will be given access to the site and not the group resources such as calendars and conversations, but it'll be all of the files. That's a different scenario. That's a different scenario if you ask me. If you're using kind of like an internal scenario, you want to use Teams for like your sales department, okay, and they do all their chat and conversations and calendars and meetings, all that stuff, but you want the documents to be shared with the rest of the organization, this is where you go. Does that make sense? So it's a little broader. This is more specific. We found out, hey, this tool right here, not going to work. Okay, we could also invite them to actually groups, but now you're just dealing with the whole old SharePoint permissions model, and that's just really hard to deal with. So check this out. So we are able to, in documents, go, and you guys kind of saw this in the end, I can go into like property, I can go to leases, I can take a whole folder, and I can use the classic share feature. Okay, in here, depending on what your tenant has been configured with, I can say this tenant is allowed where SharePoint can be shared externally to specific people. I got to type. That's me. I'm going to send him an email. Awesome. So it now sends me an email just to the leases folder, and that's all I should have access to. Now for quick, and I don't want to wait for the email, I'll say copy link here. And if I switch over to my other identity, let's see if we can get that to show up. Remember, in this location, there was leases and property. What I don't want to see, I don't want to see properties. I want to see leases only. Oh, come on. Let's go back. Leases, copy. What's that? Did I, when I shared it, did I do it wrong? Oh, when I did a copy link, thank you. Yep, I need to do it. Oh. I just need to grab the address. There we go. Let's just grab the address. Let's not do the share. There we go. Awesome. So now I have access through a different user account, an external user. But if I go back to property, all I see is leases. The other folders are missing. Even if I go back to documents, it doesn't give me access to anything at that level. And if I were to keep going, let's say I'm really technical and smart. I want to see what's going on in this site. Okay, I start hacking the address here. Boom, I want to get to the home page. It wasn't giving me access. It gave me access only to that particular folder. And it's a win. It's a win, it's a win, it's a win. So I think for this use case, we really found that Teams is awesome. It's got all these great features. But reality is sometimes you have unique permissions. You have a mixed environment, which you really need to work with. And so we found that, hey, we had to think through it a little bit differently and look at, hey, use Teams for internal, and then on the SharePoint side, take folders and then share them out directly within the external users, and they gave them the access they wanted. Awesome. How you guys doing? You good with me on that? Cool. Let's keep moving on. Yeah, sometimes it's too much, sometimes just not enough. Okay. All right, so my last case study I'll talk to you guys about is this idea of site sprawl. Okay, and Chris did a really good job of kind of teeing this up, this idea of when you release teams to people, do you allow them to self-service? Means this create teams as they want. Who does that? Cool. Who does that but is not against it? Okay, so the team sprawl idea, my first opinion of it is I'm totally fine with it. Let it go. Just let it go. Okay. And I know I'm talking to IT people and you guys all like, dude, you've betrayed me. What are you saying? Okay. Now here's my motivation. Okay. And let me talk through that, and then I'll talk through why we had to do this. Because if you don't have this unique scenario, then you should allow team sprawl. Okay. Here it is. All right. Do you guys have to manage the infrastructure that these sites have to go into? No, you do not. No, it's in Azure. It's in the cloud. Once upon a time, we used to put these site collections into our own servers, into our own SQL databases. And there was what we called a physical architecture you had to follow. Otherwise, SharePoint would stop performing. Okay, every database had a 200 gig performance limit. And it had a threshold. It was a best practice to have a single site collection per content database, which means if you had 10 site collections that were going to be very big, you'd put them into your own SQL server database and have this thing scaled out. You guys follow me? Unless you had restrictions on the amount of size of the site collection, which you limited to, let's say, 30 gig per collaboration site, right? That were self-provisioned, and you allow them to go into one database that you can manage over time with a life cycle. This is your life, right? We lived with this. And we spent so much energy, and we were so concerned about too many sites because it would fill up the physical storage that was supporting it underneath it. Guess what? It's not my problem anymore. But I still have that like pain of fear. Does that make sense? And my reaction is to control it, right? Because we got the call in IT that says, why is my site, the executive calls you, says, why is this site so slow? And then you're like, oh my gosh, we didn't do this architecture type of thing. We should put this architecture in. It was always a secondary thought, right? And we got burned by it. So now we have pain and burn, and it still stings, and that's a little too psychological. But that's the idea. So step number one, I'd say site sprawl, I'm okay if that's your reason. Make sure you check yourself. Make sure that's not the reason. Number two, okay, what is the likelihood that a user is going to go discover looking for a team to go join and be a part of? Who is going to walk down the street knocking on doors looking for parties to attend? Okay, I just don't see that happening. Okay, and it's kind of funny because if you put it in that context, if you do that, your manager might say this. He goes, "Oh, you don't have enough to do? You need to be part of another team? Oh, Saturdays are designed for people like you. Okay, come on into the office." Nobody goes out to Teams and says, "Man, I just want to. Where else can I get engaged?" Right? Not going to happen. Okay. So you're not going to keep on knocking until you find a party you like. Because Teams is not social. These are not optional. And for most of the organizations we work with, we usually try to make that distinction between Teams and Yammer. Yammer is optional. Like you can ignore any content in Yammer, and that's kind of your rule. You put anything in Yammer that you can be ignored, that would normally be informational. Hey, by the way, today's Walking Wednesday. Come join us out in the parking lot. We're gonna make 3 laps. Those kinds of things, right? That is not gonna impact my performance, right? You put all that stuff there, but Teams is not optional. This is where you get stuff done. You cannot ignore instant message pings. This is where your documents are stored. This is the stuff. When you put in those contexts, you're like, yeah. So if that makes sense to you, number 2 defense is another reason why you can allow team sprawl. Okay. So, but here is the scenario. Okay. Well, let me go back. The scenario is this, is that they really wanted, I worked with this client, and two clients I'll mention, is they really wanted to make it so that they knew they're going to have a large amount of teams, and they didn't want imposters. They wanted that this team is really the HR team. And they knew that they're going to have lots of teams listed in their teams interface. Okay, and then when they look at them, they wanted to say, this is the one for HR. Here's the ones for my departments I'm a part of. Here's my projects I'm a part of. Here's my cross-functional teams. They wanted some kind of way to identify them. And it really wasn't that big of a discovery concept. It was just a matter of like kind of a naming convention, right? Can we put a naming convention at least? So when we look at all these, we can find these things. The answer is yeah, we sure can. Sure can. Okay, so here's kind of what we came up with them. Naming conventions could be a couple different ways, okay? And if you're not familiar with how naming conventions work in Microsoft Teams, is that when you go to provision a team with its name, you type in this part. And then we can put a prefix in front of it, and then we can fill in an attribute from the user's profile. Fill in an attribute from the user's profile, like what department they're from. Is that cool? That's kind of cool. So let's say Jim is a part of retail. He creates a team called Springline 20, and so it's a project. It's P Springline 20-retail would actually be the name. And so the way they got this thing set up, so it looks like this for their naming convention, that if they have a team that represents an official part of their department, it had the prefix of D. If it's a project, it's a P, cross-functional C. If it's a general, it was a G. You guys follow me? Okay, now out of the box, we weren't able to make this happen. Okay? So we purchased a product for them called Valo Teamwork 2.0. You heard Chris Stevenson mention it from Masco. And what Teamwork does for you, you turn off the self-service and you drive people to the site. That I just don't like in itself. Okay, but you're at least corralling the cattle, right? One direction. They go out to this form, they fill out a form, they say, what is this? Is this a project? Is this a department? Is it a cross-functional? Is it a general? They have to pick one of those. Okay, they fill in the name. They fill in some numbers, they hit save. It just built, and then it runs code behind the scenes and it provisions the team automatically for them. But at that point, we've now captured it. I now have a catalog of all the different project teams, all the ones that represent functional departments, ones that are cross-functional, and we can also apply life cycles to them. So if it's a general team, we ping them every 18 months and says, hey, you still using this? 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 If they say yes, you get another 18 months. For departments, we don't ping them. They just stay out there forever, right? Projects, they fill in a start date and an end date. Part of their form that they fill out. So 60 days after the project end date that they filled in is over, we ask them, hey, you done with this? You done with this? You done with this? And when that may be, it gets deleted. Maybe it means that it also just stays. But we kind of now have a disposition on it. We say it's now closed. These are the closed project. And then whatever our records management policy is, the says, which is like 7 years. 7 years after a project's been completed, you can dispose of the records. Now we know which ones those are, and we can dispose of them with a different job routine 7 years after they've been dispositioned. Is that cool? That's cool. But this is highly, how many guys are thinking about these problems? I'm curious, seriously. Awesome. That means you guys are way on the mature model. right? You've already thought about teams, you thought about storage, you thought about records retention. You know, you could probably name the person in the records department by name who holds that policy, right? That is a very mature state of your organizations. A lot of organizations are like, what? We get rid of stuff? No. You mean I have to get rid of the things I print out on a regular basis? Yeah, probably should do that too. So that was the naming convention we work with. So here's kind of the example. HR, it looked like this. Projects looked like that. And we had a cross-functional one for SummerSlam. Okay, awesome. All right, so I got 2 minutes here. I'd love to open it up for Q&A for you guys. Does anybody have any questions? In your classic team site? Then you can display them as a tab. The question was, what if you have multiple, in a classic team site, what if you have multiple document libraries and you want to present them inside teams? So you can either migrate them into channels. I would call that solution awesome A. That's an A+ solution. Solution B would be to display that content as a tab inside Microsoft Teams. So people can get to it through the Teams environment, but this is really, they can work with the documents right there, but it's not as a A+ experience. Yep. Anybody else? Questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's not my zone, but we implement Teams even in our own organization. I haven't had a desk phone in 5 years. It just comes through, it came through Skype. Now it comes through Teams. So I kind of love it. So, but we do have technicians on the red level side that do that architecture, the phone system, implementing it. And we have a call center. So like we do managed services, so we can take like help desk stuff. So our help desk number, and now gets all that stuff gets routed through Teams and gets routed to folks answering phones on a service desk. It's pretty cool. Talk about an infrastructure change. That's a massive infrastructure change. And we're kind of pitching that to the folks that are acquiring. The organization is acquiring veterinary clinics. So they have all these little mom and pop veterinary clinics. They have their own independent phone systems. They go, why don't you guys just offer a unified phone platform? They go, awesome. I go, have you looked at Teams? Yeah, we're looking at that and 3 others. So it's part of the package. Good question. Anybody else?
You talked about basically taking SharePoint sites and migrating them.
Mm-hmm.
If you have been using SharePoint forever, are there organizations who are trying to do that with all of their existing SharePoint sites? Or if not, what is the criteria for when you would advise to do that?
Yeah, that's the great answer there is depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a volume. For me, it's a volume thing. Like how many sites are we talking about? Do you have manpower to actually do that? So they're going to say, it's a lot, Ryan, and I don't. Then I would say, let them be and start new. Right? That's the easiest thing for me as the consultant to say. And then you have people that cry wolf, like, oh no. Then you just walk through the steps. It's a good question. Last question, anybody else? Okay, cool. In summary, here's your reminders. Classic team sites can become modern. Number 2, mixed access can exist in Teams environment. Sprawl is not that big of a deal. It's just not. I'm not scared of it. Okay. And naming conventions are old school cool. All right, if you guys want to contact me, I am our Charnock at Red Level Group. I'm also on Twitter posting about this stuff on a regular weekly basis. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you guys on LinkedIn. So thanks a lot. Up next is my distinguished colleague, Clay Osborne. He's in charge of our development and app stuff. So he's going to share with you a whole bunch of awesome things about PowerApps, Flow, and some of the solutions that we've seen implemented through that platform. Clay, take it away. I've been waiting all day to say that.
All right. Hi, today we're going to talk about PowerApps and Flow. My name is Clayton Osborne. I'm the software development team lead at Red Level. I've been a software developer professionally for about 22 years, 30 plus if you want to count unprofessionally. Microsoft certified, Nintex certified. I specialize in SharePoint development customizations and do a lot of .NET and iOS mobile development. So that's pretty much me. Today, PowerApps and Flow. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with PowerApps or Flow, these are the new Microsoft modern offerings to replace a lot of the older technologies. So PowerApps, if you think InfoPath or like the SharePoint forms and all that kind of stuff, PowerApps kind of step in and fill in that gap plus a lot more. So in PowerApps, it has a nice design interface for a point-and-click approach to creating forms, as opposed to classic development customizations. There's no code involved. It's cross-platform, so it's going to look good on mobile. It's going to look good on desktop, Android, iOS, all of that. Plus, it's very extendable. So with PowerApps, there's an actual PowerApp mobile app that comes along with the ecosystem as well. It's tied into SharePoint. It's standalone as well. So there's a PowerApp builder that's online and in the cloud. With the mobile app, basically, you have you're getting PowerApps shared with you, and then they would surface in the mobile app so that you could open them up through the app. You can create a home screen icon to the app so that it kind of looks like its own standalone app. But it's, coming from that shared cloud experience that's tied to your 365 account. So there's a PowerApps license that goes along with that to your account so that you have access to those. You're allowed to see the PowerApps themselves. There's tons of different connectors on the back end of PowerApps so that you can reach out to external systems, internal systems. These are some of the most popular ones, but there are plenty more behind the scenes. These are just the most common ones. And that includes on-prem situations. So PowerApps, even though it's in the cloud, can connect to your on-prem data systems through a data gateway. So there's like pieces of software that you can install in the SQL box that allows your SQL box to reach out to PowerApps and surface its data that way. So PowerApps has a number of different types of apps. It ties into SharePoint, of course, as I mentioned before. So SharePoint forms, you can replace the out-of-the-box edit view forms with a Power App instead of using InfoPath, for example. There's also, this would be an alternative to like Nintex forms, if anyone's familiar with Nintex. There's Canvas apps, which is more of a blank slate type interface where you can create something from scratch and lay out the elements how you want in a mobile or application desktop type scenario. An alternative to that is model-driven apps, where you have the data and PowerApps kind of comes in and says, this is what your form should look like based on the data. So you can do a lot of things with dashboards and component-focused elements. Then there's portals, which is very new, external-facing websites, basically, with PowerApps. Haven't had any experience with those, but I'm sure they're great. So, and then there's the AI Builder, another new feature. It's in preview right now. It's a newer Power App platform, capability for teams with that expertise to easily automate processes and predict outcomes. So it's an exciting new field that's growing. You probably see the commercials on TV, Microsoft AI, all that. This is that tie into Power Apps. And then we come to Flow, which is basically it's workflow automation. If you're familiar with Nintex workflow or SharePoint Designer workflows, this is the new modern approach, much more powerful, upcoming interface or workflow engine with many tie-ins to many different services. So we have, push notifications. You can do content management, collect data, talk with social media, post to social media. You can migrate content from one location to another. Again, you have those connectors to external systems, pretty much anything in the cloud. Simple approval workflows, we're all familiar with doing those. And of course, email. And then of course, so much more. Now, there are many external connectors for Flow, and there are so many that the preview page on Microsoft's website, pretty much this is just the list of recents, and it just kind of keeps on going, and there's more being added constantly. So Power Apps and Flow, they work together very well. So they kind of tie in, and you've got you would use a Flow as your backend powerhouse to a Power App. The Power App is going to be your interface, and then behind the scenes, it's going to hand off, and you have all these hooks and entryways into Flow attached to SharePoint lists, your SQL servers, pretty much anything. All right, so now we're going to go into some case studies of actual Power Apps that we have implemented. One of them being with Ajax Paving. This is a trucker app, basically a way for them to enter time into the system. The problem that was faced was there was a lot of paper and spreadsheet system going on, a lot of delayed entries. The system was complex. There was a lot of errors in time entry being entered in wrong, timesheets being wrong, overlapping timesheets, a lot of issues there that could be cleaned up and consolidated, made more convenient. So the solution we were looking for, we want to centralize that data. We want everything in one spot and not delayed on paper all over the place, spread around. We need to simplify the process so that time entry is easy and fun, made more convenient for the drivers, and to make it a lot more accurate. A lot of these drivers, they're driving very long hours, and when they, stop to make their time entry, after driving for 10 hours, errors are going to be made. We got to simplify the process, make it easy and quick. So the main points of the app is to capture time entry, simplify the time submission. It needs to be able to submit time, and they need to be able to review their time. It also needs to be very powerful, secure, mobile, so that they have it with them all the time and they can enter in time when needed. It needs to be very easy to use, and a very key important was we needed a first fast turnaround. It needed to be in their hands quickly. We took a design first user-centric approach, which is what we usually do. We are an agile workshop, so we typically do a lot of things through Scrum, agile methodologies. We'll capture user stories. We'll have our UX expert come up and kind of come up with a best approach using the interface first approach, so it's easy for the users. A lot of places where you'll come in and you'll just kind of start coding away, and you'll have a very complicated interface that's not intuitive for the user to use. We like to focus on the interface first, make sure that it looks good, it's going to be intuitive and easy to use, and then start working about the back end. And then of course the user story component comes in. Is anybody familiar with Agile or Scrum, the whole user story process? So yeah, it's always that process of, as a user, I need to be able to, because, and if everything's written that way, it not only is easy to test, it's easy for the developer as well to know exactly what they need to do, and it delivers a solid, testable, tangible, deliverable feature that they can actually use right away. And then you just build on that. So we take that approach and kind of focus on the interface first and go from there. For this app, we needed to focus on usability for the truck drivers who have been, working long hours and just need to get this done. For this app, we have large, conveniently located buttons, just easy point click right on through to enter their time. Quick, intuitive data entry. It helps with accuracy and just reduces, error proofs it. You can't really mess this up. Enter in your time and done. And then, there's some more metadata that we, of course, capture along with that. We'll go through in a second. Also, the drivers, they're driving at night a lot too. And, this application, we needed to implement a night and day mode. The last thing you want after 10 hours of driving and you're parked and you're getting ready to put up for the night is to have this bright screen in your face that you have to sit here and wide-eye enter in all your data entry at the end of the day. So we can change all of the screens from this night bright mode to day, night and day mode, whichever they prefer. So all of the screens have this shift that just. So the application, of course, starts off at the main screen where they can enter their time, that nice big button. We're going to enter our time. Need to pick basic 2 routes here, material or an asphalt haul, then actually select the job. And then these jobs are coming from an on-prem SQL database in this case. So there's that data gateway I mentioned in play here. where that data gateway is installed and it's pulling data from SQL and publishing it up to PowerApps. So it's available in the app as a managed list for the dropdown. In that case, this job list. And then that goes for selecting the phase as well. That's a managed list. And then when they enter their time, it's going back into SharePoint and we're storing the data in a SharePoint list. So SharePoint is our data repository for everything in this case. And then plenty of data validation, checking for overlaps, make sure we're not entering in the same amount of time that we just had. We're not double billing for the same time. Prevents multiple timesheets. They can't create a new timesheet until the previous one is submitted. They can also go and look at their entire timesheet, which has been stored in SharePoint, and then go and submit the timesheet back so that now it's basically up for approval. And then there's a second Power App, which is the administration view back in SharePoint, where the administrators and approvers can see total list of all of the timesheets coming in and approve or reject. There's a flow behind that to basically drive, we got workflow behind that driving the approval process. And then at that point, where there's validation, reminders, approvals, rejections, but then importing into the payment system. Originally, we had thought, we would automate that, but that basically they needed at the time was to just be able to export this and then pull it into their internal system manually from an Excel spreadsheet. Totally possible to automate that kind of thing with PowerApps and Flow as well. Interface with web APIs, same as most other workflow engines as well. So what basically was delivered is an accelerated, more accurate reporting of time roll or time to payroll, elimination of a lot of the common mistakes and errors that happen with time entry, gives them that nice, fully functional, available app in both iOS and Android. So cross-platform there, selecting that day or night mode, reduce need and saving a lot of time manually researching errors and following up with drivers on was this time really correct? You get after long hours mistakes are made, and then of course entering your time in at the end of the day. Sometimes you forget everything that's going on. How many people here enter their time in daily or even right after the meeting you were just in? It's a good idea to always enter in things immediately, after you're completed with the drive. You don't want to save that for the end of the week and then hand in all these paper receipts of what you had done. Accuracy definitely suffers. But there's a simple, intuitive design resulting in minimal training. When you have a very simple, intuitive app with that user experience first, people just know how to use it. They just know how to use it just by looking at it. You don't need to train them on how that works. If you need a manual to use most mobile apps, then typically you failed. There should be intuitive, and especially when you're talking iOS, there's a certain set of guidelines that Apple has for the human guideline interface recommendations on how buttons should look and how this, and just everyone knows how to use it. Anyone who has an Apple device knows exactly how to use everything because of that common interface. And the same with Android, they have their way of doing it as well. So that brings us to our next case study, Johnny Green. Now this was kind of a similar app in that it's based on people who were out in the field. This one was the plumbing industry specifically, and it was iPad oriented versus phone. So there's a little bit of a larger screen to work with there. The problem is, again, a paper-based system was in order. Work orders for invoices were on the trucks, and it was just paper that was going back and forth. The billing lifecycle depended on it was very dependent on the physical office. All that paper had to go out the trucks, it had to come back, and everything had to be put together and entered into the system at that point. So again, a lot of room for error. There was a lot of delays. Solution should be mobile. It needs to be connected so that, again, we have that centralized repository of everything. It needs to be powerful, easy to use, and controlled in that sense with validation and just really tracking what's going on. So they had three primary forms: the field service work order form, the labor record, and the parts and material record. And then these are all kind of related. Some of these are the labor record, and there's always a labor records, and parts and materials records as a part of a field service work order. The challenges with this, particularly real world, everything doesn't go quite as easily as you would like to, and you have to get over technological hurdles. This is no different. We had multi-dimensional forms to deal with, which, you're talking like a header record with detail records. And, PowerApps can, of course, support that, but just the interface, how we wanted to do that made it a little bit more difficult and a challenge to get it looking the way that we needed it to. There were browser incompatibilities that we did run into with just a standard PowerApp form. And then PDF creation. They needed to be able to create PDFs for printing the stuff off later. So out of the box, Flow can't create PDFs without a couple of steps that I'll discuss here. So first of all, multi-dimension forms. As I mentioned, we have the main field service work order form, which has a lot of different sections at the bottom for multiple rows of extra detail that we're adding to this form. And then, of course, each one of those had its own screen, and each one of those could have a sub screen as well. And then pulling up each of these, it got very complex, and doing this in the point and click interface was a little better, of course, than manually coding it from scratch, but the format of these was a little out of the box, using, I believe they used a gallery control to do this, but getting headers to line up with the design, it was quite a challenge. But we overcame that, and the form ended up looking great. The browser incompatibilities we ran into, the SharePoint list forms didn't look right in every browser. So we had to create basically two apps. So we had the SharePoint interface, and people using the desktop machines would use the original app that was built kind of on top of SharePoint in SharePoint. But then we also spun up a Canvas app, the other alternative PowerApps type of app where you control the GUI yourself completely, and had to kind of redo the interface in the Canvas app so that it would show up on the mobile devices a lot better. So, and they had iPads in the trucks for that. And then displaying those larger forms down on a smaller mobile device. Most of the time they used iPads, but they could bring it up on their phones as well. So we switched over to the Canvas app and fixed all of those browser compatibility issues. So the PDF creation, though, I would say was the biggest challenge. Not having that direct, hey, I want this on the screen to be exported to a PDF functionality available. So we had to jump through a couple of hoops and get creative with this one. So the major hurdles, of course, we could talk to a third-party service. We could sign up for a web API of sorts where you send the data, they send back the PDF. It was expensive, though. It was there was licensing costs per user. We could have purchased a third-party flow action. I mentioned how this stuff is extendable. You can customize and create your own flows. You can create your own flow actions. You can create a lot of connectors. All of that kind of stuff is extendable. The developer community is constantly creating new ones. Companies are offering them for sale, subscription. Again, I believe that third-party flow action they were looking at was like $5,000 a year, which again, they didn't want to, pay that yearly when they could go the custom route and have it created once at a one-time cost, maybe a little more than $5,000, but in the end, you're not paying that reoccurring constantly. But we came up with a way that utilized the Microsoft stack that was already available versus creating a new flow action that didn't exist, which would have been a lot more lower level, a lot more time intensive. We used Flow, SharePoint, and SharePoint's ability to fill in Word documents, kind of like mail merge type situation. With Word documents, you can create a template that has properties in it that you can populate with data from SharePoint. And then we used OneDrive as well. So while Flow didn't offer an actual way of creating a PDF from a document, OneDrive did. There was a method in OneDrive. So there was a flow that you could save the document to OneDrive and convert it from a PDF using that engine. So we started in SharePoint, and that data would then get merged into a Word document, which would end up in a document library in SharePoint, which the flow would then take and convert that document. It would drop it in OneDrive, convert that to a PDF using the OneDrive command, and then the PDF was referenced in OneDrive, and a link to that PDF was then written back to the SharePoint list, so that when they generated the PDF, they would get a link that they could bring up and display the PDF, and then they could print it off. And there were 2 reports. The Word method, of course, with mail merge, doesn't support repeating lists of data. You can't just have it expand and shrink based on the data you have. So we had to go a little lower level on that particular report and start with Flow parsing HTML together. So that got a little bit more complicated. So again, we started in SharePoint and iterated through the SharePoint list items, put together an HTML block in a variable in Flow, and then looped through all the line detail items again, writing and piecing together that HTML in a variable. And then that one variable was saved as a file to OneDrive, and then the OneDrive action could then write that to a PDF, which again, we saved that link back into SharePoint. So there was quite a bit surrounding that whole process, but it was fairly successful and it works well. The next case study we have was a local Grand Rapids jeweler company. They needed a solution to their problem. Basically, they had salespeople who were on the floor selling jewelry, and the people would be entered into their system for follow-ups. Someone bought a piece of jewelry one week, and maybe 3 months down the road they want to follow up and see how they're doing, maybe get some repeat business that way. And but there were no actual schedules like saved. They had their primary CRM system where everything was entered in, but there was nothing automating that, nothing taking that and running on that data. So there are no schedules, there were no reminders, there was no accountability. They didn't know who was handling what clients just at a glance. They couldn't visualize the big picture. They couldn't see all of the data. It was just kind of hidden in the records system. The data was outdated pretty much anytime they looked at it. What they ended up doing was every 2 weeks, they would print off this giant binder, which had all of the records for all of the follow-ups that they want to do. And that was, outdated the second that they printed it, and tons of wasted paper, obviously. And then it was a security concern because someone could, walk off with this binder and have their entire client list. So they had to waste paper because it was outdated immediately, and then they had to destroy it afterwards too. And then of course they had a small budget, so kind of enters in PowerApps, which is a great model for this because it's a quick turnaround type development cycle. There's no code. We're not spinning up IIS. We're not spinning up on-prem resources to host a website or a new application. We're going to use the Microsoft stack that they already have. The old process, as I explained, salesperson on the floor, that new clientele added records, those 2-week printouts, those follow-ups, they wanted them to be conducted in a cadence, an actual schedule, certain months, and then they would just repeat that process over and over. What the solution needs to do, we need to capture and store those tasks centrally. Again, it's pretty much the theme for most of these case studies. We want that data stored. We want to be able to work against that data. We want scheduled follow-ups. So Flow, in this case, we want that type of repeatable process, scheduled email reminders, or within an app, which is what we're basically going for here. They want dashboards so that they can see the whole of how is the sales process doing, how are these tasks being managed, are they being answered in a timely fashion, and we want it to be cloud-based. So this was kind of the graph of, they dubbed it the playbook application. They wanted Power BI display dashboards. They had on-prem SQL for their in-house app where everything was being tied in currently and everything was being stored. That's where all the clients were right now. But we wanted to bring this up to the cloud in a Power App. So we wanted this front-facing app that the floor people could always look at to know what their actionable items, basically. So we proposed PowerApps. It would basically, we would interface with a SQL Azure database. So again, in the cloud, the Power App would be able to write back and forth. So be able to read the clients, but also commit and finalize the tasks, complete them, do the follow-ups, and then track that in that SQL database. And then of course, surface everything into Power BI so that we can see the metrics of what's been going on. And they landed on a very cheap Azure, pricing scheme of $15 a month, which is great. In fact, Ryan over here at that price felt like giving his entire family SQL Azure databases for Christmas. Sorry, Ryan. So
You need them everywhere.
And then we're talking about Ryan still. He was a part of this engagement. Mentioned to them, do you want that mobile? And their eyes lit up. Mobile. Now, they're picturing the salespeople carrying around their phones and doing this, on the sales floor, being able to write off these tasks. And, we could talk to the Power App's going to connect to SQL Azure, have that two-way communication with their device and the app, and then go across the schedule that they had put forth. So, every 2 weeks, 6 months, 11 months, diamond sales or, a different schedule. So everything's being categorized and acted upon accordingly. And then, we wrote up the user stories, of course, as I explained before. We knew that agile methodology. This makes a perfect test plan as well. As a user, I would like to see the current metrics of my follow-ups. And, the interface, this is kind of our mock-up. I wish I had real screenshots of this app, but the mock-up, yes, we checked that box. We've got, that metrics. I want, a user would like to have a button to access my current follow-ups. So again, check. We can go right down this list and, as a user, I'd love to have a button to access all of my history of follow-ups, basically anything I need to go back and make changes to. Again, we're checking that box. The user stories makes this easy, and it's easy for the client as well to kind of run down these and yep, user acceptance testing. Everything works as intended. There were a couple other screens, of course, being able to list all of the tasks and then having the actual data entry where they're writing in and following up with these clients. And then Ryan mentions another thing, gamification. How about that? Let's pit the salespeople against each other. Add a little fun to this. It's fun to enter in tasks when you see that number. You're always collecting those badges. You're always, that kind of thing. We have all this historical data we didn't have before. It's now trackable. It's rewardable, incentivized, if I can say that word. So now the salespeople, they can look at their phone and they can see who's highest ranking, what kind of numbers are we running. And then, it's trackable to management as well. So the main problem, coming back to our problems again, we can revisit. They had no schedules. Now they have real-time schedules. They can see this at a glance. They can see it quick. There were no reminders. Now we're programmatically reminding them when something is due. No accountability. Now we got assigned tasks. We know exactly who's doing what and when. We know where they are in the process, the percentage complete, if they've done it or not. Visualize the big picture. So we got those Power BI dashboards now. Outdated data. We don't need any more wasted paper. We don't need to print those binders off. It's right there on the phone. It's right there on the desktop. Because of PowerApps, it's on any device, basically. We can review that data real time. Security, again, no more binders. No one's walking off with that binder. It's in a Microsoft secured environment. Two-factor authentication. It's on your device. It's on your desktop. And we were working with a small budget. And all of this was done in a small 40-hour block. basically things were getting done so fast. Hey, gamification. Hey, you want that mobile? It just, the environment lends itself very well to this type of work. Quick, rapid development, quick turnaround. I'm a software developer, so I'm digging into the code a lot. But this is this stuff has been coming for a while. It's powerful. It makes creating very powerful applications quickly, very easily. And then of course, if you need to go deeper, you still can. You can create that custom action. You can string together SharePoint, OneDrive, and all that to come up with a powerful solution like we did with the PDF action, and kind of get the system to do something it wasn't meant to do originally, but eventually it's coming. That giant list of connectors, for example, is growing constantly. New custom actions are coming and being added to the system constantly. It's an ever growing environment that's not going to shrink. So I kind of ran through that pretty quick. We have plenty of time for QA. Yeah.
So the example that you used of the plumbing business,
Mhm.
they also, could that app be enhanced to where the plumber closes out the job and takes a picture of the devices he installed, the serial numbers of what he installed in terms of product, and then a finished, scan in the sign off from the city to kind of close out that? Could it, is that, you can continue to take it?
Yes. Yeah. So the question is, can that be enhanced to do a lot more, to actually going in and documenting all of the work and getting the sign off with the city and everything. And, obviously anything is possible with custom development. So, those flows can hook into a number of different systems. If there's specific APIs with the city, those can be created or fleshed out. The flow has a lot of interaction with the different systems. If they use a certain ERP system or a CRM, it can typically hook into that. It can hook into Salesforce. It can hook into just a regular API. When you're hooking into regular APIs, then you may, get a little bit more deep in the weeds with having to mess with raw XML and JSON, and that developer mind is going to start being needed more. But everything's possible. Like the pictures is a good example. We have another client where we've done a mobile app where they come in and they have problems with furniture, and the technician will come in and they will take a picture of the furniture. The app requires to take a distant and a close-up of the damage, and then submit that back to corporate, and then they can come up with a follow-up. Maybe they send somebody out to troubleshoot. They can annotate the pictures, all that kind of stuff.
So you can make that workflow automated so that a technician perspective who's out fixing the
Mhm.
chair, they know exactly what, there's no variance.
Yep. It's all in the interface and the back end flow. Everything's going to be state machine kind of oriented. It's going to go from bucket A to B, can go through manager approval. They can take pictures, they can submit that kind of stuff, save the pictures back into SharePoint. Really the sky's the limit.
So for that process where you took it from SharePoint to Word to OneDrive to a PDF,
Mhm.
what's the skill set needed there? Is that something you can teach, or is it you have to hire programmers?
It's something that can be taught. It is all point and click. Pretty much maybe a SharePoint power user level. You probably wouldn't have to go as far as a developer. But you do kind of have to start going into that mindset of, that problem solving, of figuring out logical if then. I'm going to set up all of the tokens in the application that I know are going to be replaced, or especially in the case of the HTML building, that's a little more deep in the weeds, right, of actually writing raw HTML and concatenating it together as one cohesive document. But it depends on the complexity, really. A single page report, you're just talking kind of a mail merge situation. And then Flow has all the steps to take you through that.
So I've been starting to work with the Power BI and data gateway and finally got that set up.
Mhm.
So what I'm starting to see now is like workflow. Like, can you take and I'll have to look into a lot of the apps, take just a process, a workflow process from start to finish in one of the PowerApps. When you take it, since I have the data gateway, connect it back to my ERP system and basically just pull out like a purchase record system
Okay,
and take it from the approval process.
so the question is to kind of automate some staging of data before it goes to Power BI. Yeah, I mean, with Flow, you can do that totally. You can take and jump data from one system to the other, pull records, manipulate it, basically put it wherever you need it. With the data gateway, you're probably talking an on-prem SQL type situation. So, the data gateways there are data gateways available, with PowerApps and Flow as well. The same situation where you can get that data, manipulate it, and basically put it back to your staging database where Power BI is going to then display it. Anybody else? Do you have any online questions? No online questions.
Clay, there was one more question that was brought up to me about all the apps that you showed that interface with the APIs. Are those included, or is there additional fees?
So yeah, the question is, are there additional fees with some of these connectors? And there are standard connectors, but there are also premium connectors. So the standard connectors typically come with your out-of-the-box Power BI license, but there are premium connectors that cost extra, either through third party, because third parties have created them and published them, and they want to get paid for their work. And as well, Microsoft offers premium connectors that are above and beyond, which increase your subscription cost basically to have access to them. So there's that elevated license for each user. So certain users could have permissions to have access to them while others don't.
I think in E5 has the Power BI Pro.
So the Power E5, yes, yeah. So yeah.
Power BI Pro, I think was $10 a month.
10.
Yeah.
So Power BI Pro is $10 a month. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not familiar with all of the pricing, but
Just because I just had it.
yeah, you just. Yep.
How do you have any advice for making a decision between whether you should build something out into so if you have the case study what the problem is and then there's a solution. Do you have any suggestions for should I look at some of the examples you gave and I can think of stuff that's already developed, turn that kind of stuff up to 11 and how do you have any suggestions for do I go just pay this they're already doing it and I can get this application or I can just design it myself. Where's the level where you would say, hey, kind of cross over and mind blow? Because I look at the time tracking and all that, and that all looks really intriguing. But we have a solution where it does all that for you in a truck. So
Yeah.
It's appealing to be able to use it with that. But how? I guess what kind of is there advice on when you should go that route or when you should build it yourself?
Okay. So the question is basically when to use third party versus building it yourself. Where's that trade-off? I mean, really, it's cost. I mean, how many man hours is it going to take you to home grow this versus, what does this third party want? If they want a subscription-based access to it, is it a one-time cost? They build it for you. I mean, we do a lot of that where we build, we engage in a project and we have that upfront estimate, that upfront cost, and we build it, and there you've got it. There are a lot of places that do subscription-based. You're buying off the shelf. Of course, off the shelf then isn't as customizable. You're not, you're working around the system. Kind of with custom development, I always kind of picture an image of a puzzle piece. That's what the client needs, is this puzzle piece, and off the shelf software is like a square that's trying to hit that, and it meets some of the needs, fills some of the arms, but not all of them. Custom development, you can get exactly what you want. Some places give you more than what you need. You've got this monolithic circle that engulfs the puzzle piece and you're paying extra for more that you don't need. But really it comes down to cost. How much time do you have available? Do you need to contract it out to somebody to build, or do you have the in-house man hours to build it? I guess it's not really answering your question since I'm just giving you more questions, but there's a lot that goes into it really. And it does all kind of boil down to time and money. When to go custom, when to purchase, and how, I guess you consider how long are you going to use it. If you're only going to use it for 2 years and you're going to jump to the next, best thing that is coming. Do you want to pay all this upfront money to have it created and then dump it, or just 2 years of subscription is going to be cheaper to get you by? All of this needs to be considered.
Yeah, no. Like for the Johnny Green application to do the PDF, you could use the Flow app, but you had to pay for every run it does. So they did 5,000 jobs a year, so that's like a price every time they had to print PDF.
Yeah, if you want.
That pricing model was no good for them.
Yeah, that was one of the third-party options, and that's often, I think Nintex document generation is that way. It's a per generated document. It comes through and they generate it and give it back to you, but they charge you each hit, or you're allowed 1,000 a month. And once you exceed that, you start, it's like your cellular plan. You're off minutes. You're now going into getting charged per minute. Anybody else? All right.
Thank you, Clay. Next up, we have Eric Inch with Microsoft on Microsoft 365 Security 101. Make sure you ask him lots of detailed questions. He loves it. Yeah.
So thanks, Megan. So I'm Eric Inch. I don't know if I know many of you guys. I do recommend, or do see a couple familiar faces, but I'm a modern workplace specialist, and my old boss, Mark, I recommend. But I'm a modern workplace specialist at Microsoft, so cover all of our teamwork, collaboration, security solutions, as well as Windows from a technical pre-sale standpoint. Today, we're going to be talking about Microsoft security. Starting off, why Microsoft? So in the past, Microsoft wasn't typically thought of as a security company. Okay, quick show of hands, how many people consider Microsoft a true security company? Okay. So we're going to talk through why that has been changing, some of our investment in security, and why you should consider Microsoft in that area. We're then going to go through some common case studies. It's going to be really around 3 of the really most common cybersecurity incidents that you probably worry about and a lot of people run into. And we'll see out there some real examples of companies that actually have faced that. And then just going to finish off with some top priorities and recommendations. So how to get started, like a 30, 90 long-term roadmap on where to go from security. The first off is really our biggest differentiator out there in the market is the intelligent security graph. So if you've heard of that, and just the amount of signal we're able to see across the globe, 630 billion monthly authentications, almost 500 billion monthly emails, over 1 billion Azure accounts. Some lesser known is stuff like botnet data from the Digital Crimes Unit. So we'll work with governments around the world. They'll call Microsoft in to do the forensics whenever there's a breach. We're able to take that data, put it into our security graph, and use it across all of our security products. Working with researchers, law enforcement. Also, another big one is the global cloud consumer commercial services. So as you can imagine, our Xbox services, one of the most attempted hacked applications out there in the globe. So we're able to see these advanced attacks, how they're happening, update and say, hey, we've never seen them move this way or try to exploit that vulnerability. Update our security graph, use it across the entire stack of security products. And what that allows us to do is really get advanced detections for the cybersecurity attacks. So we're able to leverage local big data machine learning models, take those trillions of signals and map out, hey, maybe we've never seen this before, but we're going to go ahead and block that based on the amount of data and signal we've seen out there and share it across the environment. As you'll see with some of the integration across the platform, blocking stuff at email, kicking off investigations on endpoints. So we have that full end-to-end solution. As well as we have across the 4 pillars. So identity and access, a lot of threat protection solutions that you probably leverage today. Information protection that I see probably a lot of customers not leveraging as much around the DLP, data classification, data level encryption, and then some of the security management capabilities. The first scenario we're going to talk through is around the IP theft on employee exit. So that scenario where you have an employee leave the organization, maybe before that they downloaded just hundreds of gigs of data, terabytes of data, whatever, from HR, finance, sensitive information from the company, creating a back door within the environment. So even after they're gone, they still have remote access into the environment. Large uploads and also creating file synchronization. So even after they're gone, if data is saved in specific locations, you can synchronize that out to a remote server and continually that attack from that IP theft. So the keys here are really having that deep visibility into what's abnormal within the environment. So having that detection to say, hey, I'm going to discover really early on where my employees are going. So I can see, hey, we use OneDrive, we use SharePoint Online, but this group of users or this user is now going to a Google Drive personal account, and we see just hundreds of gigs of data being uploaded to that Google account. It'll also do anomaly detection. So we can say, hey, Jack typically logs in from these machines, accesses these SharePoint sites. Now Jack's logged on from 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday, accessing sites he doesn't access. We can go ahead and give you that really early detection to say, hey, this is an anomaly. This is not how Jack typically works. Go ahead and give you that really early detection. As well as the ability to go ahead and provide some protections around that data that potentially before it goes out the door. So you can see here in this example, Stella, this is going to go ahead and identify. You can see the investigation priority score. So she's got a high risk score based on stuff she's been doing, her account's been doing recently. So some of her activities changed. She has 7 risky activities, 8 open alerts. And where a lot of that's coming from is here. You can see all of the alerts, a login to a Windows device that she doesn't typically log into, a suspicious VPN connection from a location maybe she never logs into. On-prem detections, as you can see, lateral movement path. So if you guys are familiar with like the cybersecurity kill chain, one of the early things after getting access to an environment is to move around the environment, try to compromise more machines, access more data. You can go ahead and see that detection really early on in this, as well as across cloud as well. So in the case study we had, it was a mass download and then a mass upload to some third-party external site. We can go ahead and see Stella's logged into SharePoint and did that mass download of data from the SharePoint Online environment. You can go ahead and alert the security team, alert the IT team. You can also take automatic action and block that download from continuing if it hits that threshold within your policy. But also it's really important to go ahead and have that data classified in the first place. So with like Azure Information Protection and a lot of the DLP solutions out there, you can classify that data. Hey, this is highly sensitive. This would cause business harm if it were to get into the wrong hands. I'm going to classify that data, but I'm also going to put protection and encryption around that. So I'm going to require somebody to have to authenticate. So even if it does leave the environment in that a large upload, whoever accesses that data is going to have to authenticate to access that data. Otherwise, it'll just be encrypted. It can be automatically classified based on the content within that data. So maybe it has social security numbers, credit card numbers. You can automatically classify that. Maybe it's an account number or something specific to your organization. You can create that own screen and automatically classify it based on that. Or you can go ahead and leverage if the data is stored in OneDrive or SharePoint or Teams or Box or Dropbox or some of the other third parties. You can go ahead and scan across that cloud storage, look for that sensitive content, automatically classify and protect it where it sits. Or you can intercept it if it's trying to be downloaded to a non-domain joined or non-managed machine and automatically provide that protection as well. In the scenario where the attackers probably are always going to try to keep some sort of backdoor in place, probably multiple backdoors. So if security finds the one, remediates and removes it, you don't close their access to the environment. With some of the native capabilities within Windows 10, like Credential Guard. I don't know who's familiar with Credential Guard here. Just chat. All right. So a lot of the anti-malware stuff. So the Microsoft anti-malware is multi-tiered. A lot of people think it's like signature based. It's not. It has signature detection, but it's multi-layered all the way up to detonation. We'll send a copy of that file up, detonate, and observe behavior before we actually allow access. So you can be assured that, hey, this is just not going to be 0 days getting through. We're going to observe behavior and make sure it doesn't do anything malicious. A lot of the exploit guard capabilities. And then Credential Guard is a really powerful Windows 10 capability that will allow you to secure against one of the most common attacks for moving around a network. So I don't, if you guys have heard of like pass the ticket, pass the hash, it's a really common way for somebody to steal a Kerberos ticket or a password from a machine, log into the next machine, and never need to know the user's password. Even if the user had a 50-character password, it doesn't matter because you got the password hash already. That can provide that protection. But then also having the ability to do visibility into the advanced attacks. So there's a stat like 63% of actual endpoint breaches didn't use malware at all. So these attackers are evading what they know the majority of customers have is antivirus on that machine to look for well-known viruses. This is going ahead, writing right into memory and evading those malware. So nothing's ever hitting disk, and it can go ahead and evade with those advanced attacks. So having the ability to go ahead and identify those advanced methods. You can see here, this machine is currently a high risk, a logged on user, Peter Gibbons, but it also will do it like a security assessment across the environment. So look for known vulnerabilities on there. So continuous vulnerability scan to say, hey, we've identified stuff like maybe an old version of Java or an Adobe version has a vulnerability. We can alert you really proactively to say, hey, you're gonna want to take care of this as part of your endpoint security, as well as having all of the alerts throughout the detection. And then have advanced visibility into that. So data classification, it's not the easiest thing to identify what your data classification scheme should be, where your sensitive data lives, what it should be classified as, protected, who's the permissions around that. But having that visibility to see where that sensitive data is being accessed, who's it being accessed by, as well as then being able to take decisions like revoking access after it's left the environment. So in that scenario, the case study, hundreds or terabytes of data left the environment. You could see, hey, now this is being accessed from China. I don't have any users in China. I'm going to revoke access. And then all of that data is just not even accessible anymore. So even though it's outside the environment, you still have control over that, who accesses that data. And then you can see here, like Bill Lumberg, Peter Gibbons on their machines, what types of sensitive data they have. So if you see a machine that maybe is of high risk, you can then drill in to say, hey, this is a high risk machine. Maybe somebody compromised that. I want to see what sensitive data is actually on there so I can go ahead and revoke and remove that access from there. From the second scenario, so or just to cap off the IP theft one, it's important to classify and protect your data. In a lot of these scenarios, even if that data were to leave undetected, making sure it's encrypted and requires authentication, have the ability to revoke it, it's important. You can sleep a lot easier if it does happen. But really having the additional visibility into that data exfiltration, the anomalies into the environment. I talk to the majority of my customers, and one thing they know is there's shadow IT in the organization. The next thing is they don't know what it is. They know their users are using personal cloud storage, personal external sites, probably a lot of personal email, and they just don't know how widespread that is. So having the additional visibility to see, hey, we allow Gmail, but we're going to have then controls around what you can actually go ahead from a corporate data standpoint put out there. Some have the advanced protection. So as I mentioned, the majority of endpoint breaches don't leverage known antivirus. You have to go above and beyond nowadays. It's quite easy for an attacker to evade just an anti-malware solution on the endpoint. And really important, and probably not stressed enough, monitor and respond to the security alerts. So be really diligent and proactive, staying in the alerts. Don't wait until a user says, hey, something odd's going on within my environment. I have a customer that had a security breach, and they were in the environment for 2 years. And the way they identified it is the IT admin logged into a server that somebody overseas was already logged into. And they're like, hey, this is odd. I don't know why anybody's doing that. They had forensics come out, do it 2 years ago. Somebody bought some fake thing online, It didn't come. So then they sent like, hey, go ahead and open this attachment and we'll go ahead and this is your receipt or we'll get your refund started. Open a back door into the environment. And for 2 years it was just undetected. So really, really important to go ahead and monitor maybe some of those security authentication logs. If you guys have a SIM correlating a lot of those events, or a lot of these advanced tools will help automatically show you those anomalies within the environment. Also, irresponsible third party. I'm sure everybody's heard of the Target breach and the big issue they had. It was leveraging a third party vendor account that wasn't monitored, and that's how the attacker came in. It's been a phishing attack, which if I saw hands here, everybody's probably seen a fair amount of phishing attacks come through the email. Sent them a phishing, stole their credentials, logged in, went undetected, was able to create a persistence with an account creation, created a different account that wasn't known, did some advanced memory scraping, and then used common utilities like PS exec from sysinternals to go ahead and do some of that data exfiltration and steal just however many hundreds of thousands or millions of credit cards that ended up being. I think, around $300 million in total loss to Target. So just the numbers can be really, really damaging from a security standpoint. Some capabilities. So one of the biggest things, and it was like 91% of known breaches over the past couple of years started from email phishing attack. Reasons for that is it's easy to do and it's very simple. Regardless of how much security training you have a handful of people that are going to click on anything they get in their email, without question. So they're able to evade the anti-malware. So with a lot of the advanced solutions out there, we can actually scan it for malware, open up a copy of it, detonate it, and observe behavior before passing it on. So those attacks that are completely 0-day, maybe you're the target they're going after, you can go ahead and still say, hey, we haven't seen this before, but if you open this, it's going to do XYZ, and XYZ are bad. So we're going to go ahead and block that email from that advanced attack. More common, though, I see the malicious email link. So not even trying to use a malicious attachment, sending users out to a link that goes to a site that probably looks exactly like your Office 365 login screen to go ahead and provide your credentials to verify before end of day or your account's going to be disabled type thing. Once they have that, then they have your account, they can log in, and we can talk about some of those other protections around that as well as some of the anti-spoof, anti-phish. So here you can see within the Security and Compliance Center, real quick, how many people are currently on Office 365 today? Okay, so most. Yep. So you can see the top threats facing your organization, who the top targeted users are, likely a lot of your executive team, your management team that they're probably going after, your finance team. You can also see how it's trended over a period of time. Quite common for an attacker not to just send a bulk phishing campaign day one. They'll send a little bit here, a little bit there, tweak depending on how successful, and then cast that wider net. So you can actually see beforehand, hey, we want to be aware that this is probably coming within the organization. You can also, with some of the advanced detection and integration across the platform, see stuff like an automated investigation. So in this scenario, weaponized URL came in that was maybe able to evade the initial detection. It'll go ahead, reach out, investigate all emails across the organization. So the investigation kicked off. We see this mailbox is or 6 mailboxes are doing intra-org phish. So the attacker got in. The first thing he tried to do is say, hey, I'm going to attack my internal employees, try to get more credentials, try to get more compromise. But I'm also going to go ahead and investigate the user standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and see, I got suspicious logins to Jeff V's account, and he did a mass download. So integrating it with some of the cloud monitoring and security solutions, we can see weaponized URL came in. They did some internal work to go ahead and spread on the network, but they also logged in remotely and downloaded a bunch of data that Jeff had access to. I'm also going to kick off an investigation on the machine. So since I have visibility into email, identity, and endpoint, I can kick off an investigation. We're going to see, hey, this user is compromised, anomalies detected, the device is compromised as well with malware. I'm automatically going to take remediation, block that URL, delete all emails, require the user to password reset, and then require multi-factor authentication on that account. So in that scenario, the user logged in once, had access from some remote location because we can see from suspicious login. Going forward, it's going to have to require multi-factor authentication where then Jeff V is getting that phone ping or they have to enter that 6-digit code to say, hey, somebody's trying to authenticate from somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Germany or whatever, wherever that's identified. And one of the biggest and easiest areas, and I just saw a stat that our product group put out, was like 10% of our enterprise customers are leveraging multi-factor authentication today. And that's mind-blowing because so many attacks actually leverage just stolen or weak passwords. And of what we've identified, 99.9% of those attacks would have been blocked if multi-factor authentication were in place. So a lot of people leverage is, hey, we're going to go longer passwords or make them change passwords every 30 days, 60 days, or whatever. That's not going to protect a lot of these advanced attacks where multi-factor, not going to block them all, but a lot of these ones that are going to be taken advantage of could be blocked with multi-factor. Included within a lot of the Office 365 Microsoft suites, is everybody using multi-factor today or looking at it at least? Okay. One thing to leverage with that is what we call conditional access. So it really allows you to get granular in how you provide that secure authentication. So you can get specific devices. As an example, you can say, hey, these 10 applications can only be accessed from a domain joined and managed machine. So you can assure, hey, those are the ones I have my antivirus, my group policies, my monitoring on. If not, maybe I'm going to require multi-factor. You can also go down to physical location. So say, hey, maybe if it's a domain joined machine from one of my corporate locations, I trust that enough. They're able to compromise the machine and get on the network, get an IP address. I'm not going to require multi-factor every time they access that. However, maybe you want to allow OWA access for remote access to OWA from non-domain joined machines. Pretty common scenario. You can still allow that, but then maybe you require MFA in that scenario. So you can go ahead and still allow those other scenarios, but have the ultimate or the best case security on that. You can also, with SharePoint and OneDrive, you can provide limited access. So you can evaluate where they're connecting from, what device, maybe allow access after multi-factor. But then I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, you're from a non-domain joined machine. You can access SharePoint, but it's going to be read-only. So there won't be ability to sync the document library. There won't be the ability to download the document from SharePoint or OneDrive. So you can still allow them to read-only access from their cousin's machine, their grandma's machine, their best friend's machine. But they can't go ahead and say, I want to sync all of my corporate documents down to that machine. So that's a capability part of Azure AD conditional access. You can see here, Peter, in this scenario, was trying to get to a site that required domain joined access. It blocked him because he was not on a domain joined machine. We also have the ability to tie in some risk-based authentication to say, hey, we're going to go ahead, and if you're doing something identified as one of our risk levels, for example, if it's a high risk and we've identified out in the dark web that your credentials have been compromised, we're going to go ahead and say, hey, obviously any authentication after that, I think we'd all agree is high risk because everybody can have access to your password. Maybe you're logging in an impossible travel scenario where you log in from Detroit, Michigan, and then an hour later you try to log in from Germany. Nobody travels that fast, so it's going to be a higher risk authentication. Maybe it requires multi-factor, or maybe it just blocks it completely and requires you try again later. With some of the advanced visibility, so you can see the malicious credential theft tool, nothing running actually on the machine, but you can see with the advanced capabilities, the actual commands that were run into memory on that machine. So you can get really, really granular for a lot of those advanced attacks that aren't just trying to trick you with some well-known script or malware, and go ahead and get that really early detection for your security team to go ahead and then further investigate what's going on in that endpoint. You can see here, you can also tie that in with conditional access to say, hey, maybe from a corporate network location on a domain joined machine, that's usually trust enough. However, we see a lot of malicious stuff going on the machine. We're going to block access even in that scenario until that machine can be remediated. Just a couple key takeaways here. Advanced email, something you guys should definitely look into. Anti-spam, anti-malware, still definitely needed. But a lot of attackers, it doesn't take them much time to realize what could get through those email security. Have something that can do some detonation, observed behavior. ensure strong authentication for all accounts. As I mentioned at the end, I'm gonna have a recap of like a 30-90 roadmap. One of the things you'll definitely see on there is MFA for all admins, MFA for all users. Try to tie together with some conditional access so you're not bombarding your end users with multi-factor every time. Every 2 hours, they have to go check their phone. It probably won't be a successful rollout. Try to look at some advanced endpoint protection and response. Take that anti-malware a step further for a lot of the advanced detections. And then just, if possible, look at some integrations across. So as you saw, maybe the endpoint didn't identify anything malicious going on it, but since a malicious email came in, you can kick off that detection and automatically provide that scan across the environment. The final one's going to be personal devices. Does everybody, or do a lot of people use like BYOD for bring your own device, allow your employees to bring, enroll their own devices? Quite common these days. I see a lot of customers getting away from that corporate owned. A lot of times then you have 2 phones, just giving them a stipend or something. Personal devices for data exfiltration, a lot of well-known attacks. Personal email and devices. I don't see it very common in some certain industries, but do you guys allow access to like Gmail accounts, personal email accounts? Is that a no over here?
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, that's good. But we see a lot of customers still allowing that and not restricting that. So having the ability to go ahead, remote access, abnormal and excessive login times. It goes without saying that.
Sorry, do you put like an MDM on their personal phone in that situation?
So we see some do MDM enrollment on a personal phone depending on the requirements.
Okay.
Yep, with our solution, we actually have what's called mobile application management, where you don't even have to do the full MDM enrollment.
Okay.
Since I think I saw everybody's hand go up for Office 365, what you would be able to do is allow access to a lot of the corporate applications that have access to your data. So email, the SharePoint app, OneDrive app, Teams app, all of our apps, third-party apps can be wrapped as well. And what that does is it provides that authentication when going into Word, for example. It'll provide that authentication. It'll hit your Intune and we'll identify, hey, there's a MAM policy for this application. We're going to then provide that encryption, that data leakage protection right on that app. A lot of the BYOD scenarios really like this a lot better than having that full MDM enrollment with the device message that is really scarier sounding than it really is, that, hey, can corporate see everything on my device? No, but a lot of users will think. So this just provides it. And the most important thing is, from a corporate standpoint, you can go ahead and pull that data, pull those apps off when you need, and not go ahead and have to remove any personal pictures on there, their personal data, and prevent that data leakage in between.
It works really well.
You guys use that?
Yeah, we have work profiles, so we can wipe the phone and it actually even maintains a separation between local phone storage and anything in the work profile. So it causes issues from time to time where you can't access a certain thing, but it works very well.
So as he said, no issues whatsoever. Yeah, so there are definitely some scenarios that when you're looking at your MAM policies to provide that data barrier, data leakage control, where you can go ahead and customize now some other apps I want to go ahead and provide data transfer to and some others can't. Personal data on that device probably is not going to be something you want, but could cause issues in some scenarios for sure. Also on Windows 10, a lot of people don't know, but a lot of that same capability is available on Windows 10 with Windows Information Protection. So you can actually identify a user accesses a file stored on the file server. We're going to go ahead and identify that as corporate, and then you can have your controls on, hey, this can only be used in other corporate identified applications. Somebody tries to take that data, put it in an attachment in a personal Gmail account, will automatically block that from being attached or pasted, even the content of that document pasted in there, as well as gives you the ability to pull that corporate data off a machine. Probably less common, but are any of you guys doing BYOD from a desktop or a laptop standpoint, where you just allow your users or employees to go out, pay for a desktop or a laptop in a certain, no? So we see that more and more common as like the modern management, autopilot gets more popularity, getting away from the imaging. This is a way we see that you can provide that additional security. So even if a user is outside the organization, you can wipe that corporate data off the device from that BYOD scenario. But additional discovery, so you can see From a personal email standpoint, what users are going to and how much data they're sending up, when they're going, and provide those policies around. Say, hey, maybe I'm still going to allow access to these personal emails, but I want to see everything and where they're going. You can block risky, unsanctioned apps, other third-party cloud providers that maybe aren't one of the bigger, more secured solutions. But really having the ability to detect that abnormal behavior and some of the malicious attacks. So being able to do like, even within your on-prem Active Directory, stuff like reconnaissance and the cyber kill chain, if somebody gets on the network, compromises the machine, they probably don't know where they're going. They probably know nothing about your environment. First thing they're going to do is spend their time mapping out where your domain controllers are, your database servers are, your file servers, map out how they're going to move as part of that attack. You can actually go ahead and identify really early on, hey, somebody's querying all of my Active Directory groups to see who's got membership in finance or, of course, domain admins, and get really early to Dave typically logs into these two machines, these given weeks from these locations. Now Dave's user account is logged into these 9 machines at hours that he typically doesn't work. I'm going to go ahead and give you that really early detection. So even if it's a really advanced attack and they know how to invade a lot of intrusion detection, you can still say, hey, this is abnormal for how your company works, and get that really early detection. You can see here, Peter, a lot of the logins and stuff, who he typically logs into, resources he accesses. So in this scenario where Peter's just a senior programmer, doesn't have access, for example, to corporate financial file servers. Now, if Peter tries logging into those financial servers and accessing data, you'll get an early detection saying, hey, this is an abnormal potential identity theft scenario. Go ahead and take a look, because Peter doesn't typically do that. Stuff like reconnaissance, as I mentioned, querying out your map. The key takeaways here, protect your applications, devices, of course. Again, enterprise detection response. Go beyond the typical anti-malware, the firewalls, the stuff, the protection capabilities that have been around for so long, and try to get more in that respond in that detection advanced scenario. Identify shadow IT, and then quickly identify those anomalies. One thing that Target did have is with their intrusion detection, they did flag some alarms when that vendor account was moving around, but it got caught up in the noise because they were able to go ahead and make it look enough like it was legitimate work. Having some of these advanced ones, but also being diligent and proactive looking at those logs again, because some of the times out there are anywhere from 90 days to almost a year that many times an attacker can be on your network without being detected. So if you can imagine being on there for an entire year, that's an eternity to go ahead and get whatever data they want while they're in there. So where to start? So does everybody know what Office 365 Secure Score is? So a little bit. So this is our security posture and recommendations tool. Everybody that has Office 365 has access to this. What it provides is the ability to see, hey, out of a possible 200 points or 500 in specific areas, you guys score that level, and this is why. We'll break down what constitutes that score, as well as you can see here, enable MFA for privileged roles. You enable that, you immediately get 50 points, so you can actually see how you've trended over a period of time. Have less global admins, use non-global administrative roles, so don't do your normal user account, also have admin roles. The one that does all the web surfing, all the email, don't have them also be able to go have admin rights. It's AD as well as cloud best practices. And go ahead and map out how you can go ahead and trend over a period of time. So you can actually, a lot of customers will go ahead and work on this checklist of items and show their management team, say, hey, we've trended our security posture over a period of time, and this is what we've done, and this is where we're going to help map that out. From our security roadmap recommendations, a little bit more detailed on top priorities. So you can see some identity protection stuff from a threat standpoint. Really try to get additional visibility in where your users are going on the cloud, what they're doing. You can see there, enforce multi-factor for admin accounts. That's going to be, if you go into secure score, that'll be number one for sure within the recommendations. If an attacker can compromise a low-level account, not good, but they don't really have access to a whole lot. If they can elevate that access and get an admin account, they can pretty much get whatever they want eventually. So really make sure those are properly secured. Information protection, it's not as easy to just say, hey, go start your data classification, start classifying all of your content, determine what that classification scheme is. But start thinking about that, because as you saw in that first case study, if you can have all of your sensitive data classified, protected, it's going to really reduce the exposure you have if some of that data leakage were to happen in some of those scenarios. And then obviously recommend checking out securescore.office.com, because it'll help you on that checklist of items to go ahead and look at going forward. 90 days out, it's more the enforce MFA for all users. So real quick, are there a lot of customers using the enterprise mobility security solution here? Okay. One thing, and some of this is to look at some of those conditional access policies. If you don't have it rolled out yet, MFA for all users, highly recommended. Get that. Maybe not for all apps all the time. Your sensitive apps, sensitive data. The really nice thing is even third-party cloud apps leveraging Azure AD for authentication, you can provide those same conditional access controls. So if you guys use a Salesforce, a ServiceNow, Concur, Box, you can go ahead and leverage that authentication and provide and say, hey, from domain join, require MFA, block based on risk. Go ahead and then start looking at rolling out some of your data loss prevention policies with data classification. And then finally, refining your policies, getting really granular on those authentication scenarios, secure privileged access workstations. So you guys familiar with privileged access workstations? So one of the big recommendations Microsoft has is not leveraging the same machine that you use for normal day-to-day. Or that your admin accounts log into, because as we talked about earlier, it's really, really easy to dump the Kerberos ticket or password hash to use a secured machine that doesn't have access to the internet, that can access only certain things. Maybe it's scoped to just Office 365. Nobody else can come in and have access. And then nobody's going to be able to go ahead and install a tool or dump tickets or security information on those machines. And to kind of move down there, so when you're doing admin, do just-in-time administration on a secure privileged access workstation. And then all of these, and I think you have the slides that follow up. There's a link to where all of this guidance is, and some of this has stuff that goes through that in more detail. Stuff to definitely consider. And then also highly recommend here at the Red Level events, engaging with Red Level for their security assessment offering. So a lot of this stuff you'll actually see, it does the 30, 90, 180 security gap analysis, where you're at today, what's the recommendation, as well as creating some of these policies and getting started on, hey, we heard conditional access is important. We know MFA, since it prevents 99.9% of actual known attacks, are really important. And have that, hey, how do we get started? Work with Red Level to go ahead and map out the security roadmap for you guys. Were there any questions?
As somebody who works for security at Microsoft, what are your thoughts on password change, time, 90 days for users to change their passwords? I believe it's best practice, but I've been hearing a lot that changing your password every 90 days may not be the best way to go if you're using the other things like MFA.
Yep, so if you're using the other things like MFA, even NIST recently released their guidance is no longer require those quicker, more frequent password changes, because then users typically will try to end up reusing passwords, and you're losing some of that security anyways. But if you have the MFA, some of the risk-based stuff, I think their guidance is now a year or more unless needed. So if you identified some of those high risk scenarios or something, then force them to do a password change. But otherwise, they're probably reusing their passwords. They're probably writing down their passwords. They're probably not happy with you in the first place. So the guidance is, if you have those other protections, you can push it out further. Still have a longer passphrase rather than complex. Hey, we got 4 periods, an exclamation point, and 2 letters.
Complexities and the MFA and doing all of that, and then so we have like 13 characters, all the jazz in there with the MFA, and then every 60 days they have to change the password, and people are reusing them, and then you run into the whole you can't use it. It just becomes it's a lot more trying to just keep up with people. You got to reach out to people, it's not change password.
Yep.
So
I'd recommend keeping the longer password length and pushing out the time to change that password.
And back to the earlier conversation, Eric, I mean, that's again a marketing point. So if you're introducing MFA and you're worried about adoption, that's one way to say, okay, now you don't have to change your password as often. So again, it's a marketing tactic in how we get these technologies out to our users.
And I don't know if Eric talked about it, you just go passwordless using some of the new capabilities. That is the real way. So let's go to a world where we don't have passwords anymore. So that's now a reality.
What is on the endpoints, seeing the Windows Defender Security Center, is that agent-based as far as what it's using to collect some of that information about the endpoints, the tuning, what's the endpoint?
Yep. So that's actually the very nice thing about our solution is all of you that are running Windows 10 right now have the sensor already in Windows 10. So it's just onboarding that sensor into the Defender Security Center, and it'll start reporting that telemetry.
The enterprise?
That's part of Windows 10 Enterprise E5. Yep.
All right, great job. Oh, it's only that. Thank you, Eric. So just a quick minute to kind of wrap up. Again, thanks again for your time today. We know it was a big investment of your time. Wanted to make one quick announcement about a cyber security. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but October is Cybersecurity Month. One of the things that we're hosting later this month, October 28th, or I'm sorry, 29th, at our office in Novi is a cyber security. So we're going to actually have some beer provided as part of this. And then in West Michigan, Mark Becker is leading our charge out there on November 14th for the west side of the state for cybersecurity awareness and training. Wanted to say again, thanks to our participants. Also wanted to take a minute and acknowledge the Red Level team behind you. So if you have a minute, or if you wanted to talk to any of the Red Level folks, if you guys could just raise your hand so they kind of know who and where you guys are. Just grab any of the folks. They'll be glad to tell you, answer any questions. But again, with that, we want to wrap up. Thanks so much for your time today. And thank you, Megan. I knew she would catch me. Tomorrow, you're going to get a survey in the mail, in the email, and please not in the regular mail. That would be pretty bad, wouldn't it? A self-addressed stamped envelope. But it's going to come tomorrow. Give you guys some time to digest this, and we would really honestly appreciate your feedback. Make this a better event. So thanks so much. And oh, we do have some gift bags in the back with some more information and some pretty nice Yeti cups for you. Anything else, Megan? Did I forget? All right. All right, great. Thanks so much for your time today.
You know who put it on though, right? You know I'm not there though, right? I know.